Hi you guys, welcome back. In the Gloria Swag tutorial, I showed us how to make these beautiful and really fun and easy beaded earrings using 8mm round beads, 18 gauge wire, and 20 gauge wire for the swag. And then in the variations tutorial, I showed us how to use this swag component to make these very cute variations based on that design, based on the Gloria Swag design. Now I'm going to show us how to use the very same swag component, but this time the stem of the earring, this one, or the component, will be 20 gauge wire, and I'm using 22 gauge wire for the tiny swag, and I'm using a 6mm round bead. I go 3 times instead of 4 along the swag, and then I wrap twice to secure the wire. And I'm going to show us how to take those, turn it into these beautiful bracelet links, or chain links I should say, and then you can put these together into a gorgeous little bracelet or a beautiful necklace, and maybe a few other things. I'll have some surprises to show you on maybe another variation. So I'm starting with 22 gauge wire to make the swag. The stem of the earring is a piece of 20 gauge wire, 4 inches long. It's round and it's soft, and I just straightened it with my fingers. The 22 gauge wire is 7 inches long, and I'll just cut a piece of that off. Just cut that off the spool. I'm going to make one using the smaller wire. This is very similar, well, it is the same technique as in the Gloria Swag Earrings tutorial, except for I'm using 20 gauge wire and 22 gauge wire versus 18 and 20 in the earrings tutorial. So I'll find the approximate middle of my wire, just balance it on my fingers, and that's about the middle where it's balanced. I'll hold this 6mm bead in the approximate middle of my 4 inches. You'll have plenty of spare wire, so you can always reduce your length as you get comfortable with the technique. So I'm just going to cross my 22 gauge across my 20 gauge and hold on to the bead so it doesn't move. And I'll just make a U shape around it. It's okay if you're a little bit off at the ends. And just get a nice U shape going around the bead. You'll hold your fingers in such a way that you can bend this down, along the side and pin it back on itself. I've got my finger over the U shape, so I'll just take that bend right there, and then I'll use a fine plier. Let me change my camera here so you can see a little better. Like that. And I'll just use a fine plier and give a squeeze. Keep the wire real close to the hole of the bead and just squeeze it down nice and tight, and then bring this wire back to the front. I'll come over here and do the same. Just hold on to the wire, back bend around the 20 gauge. Make sure to be right on the bead, and then just use your plier and cinch down till it's nice and tight, just like that. So you should look about like that. Make sure to keep your 20 gauge straight as you work. Just hold on to everything. You should be on an even plane here with these wires, so flat. And just take and curve around the bead right up along the other wire and come right beside it. Hold on to the curve and go all the way around the 20 gauge. Use your plier and help you close that up, and just press it back so that it's straight to the right of the previous wire. Okay, so now I'll go to the opposite wire here, come around the bead and do the same. Come over the 20 gauge into a nice U shape around the bead. Hold everything. Back bend around the 20 gauge. Squeeze it closed with your plier. Just make sure your wires are nice and level with the center of the bead. Try to keep them from separating. You can always take your pliers and go like this. And then I'll just go again, starting with the left. I'll make a nice curve around the bead, around the previous curve, around the previous wire curve, and then just back bend around the bar. It takes a little bit of practice, but you'll love the technique once you get it. And I'm just going to pinch it nice and straight. I'm working to keep my 20 gauge straight as I work, as I build this. And now I'll take the inside one, which was the opposite one, and I'll just do my last swing to the opposite side. Hold on to everything. And just bend around the 20 gauge wire and squeeze tight. Come back up here and give a little squeeze. And then I like to take my fine plier and hold it right here. It's a little easier for me to make one and two wraps around the 20 gauge to end this wire. This will be the back side of my component now. So I've got two little wraps there, and I'll cut the wire off in such a way that, leaving a millimeter there so that when I pinch it down, the cut will be in the back. Okay, and then I'll do the same with the opposite side. Just hold it there with your fine plier, and then you can come all the way around once and come around twice for two wraps. Cut it in the back. And then pinch it closed. From here, you can take a nice nylon jaw and just give a light little squeeze and tap to get those swags nice and side by side. And then just pinch it up top and you have a beautiful little component. Okay, so you can make as many of them as you need to get around your wrist or to build your chain or whatever you're building. And then I'll show you how to turn them into this cute little component and link them up together. All right, so the first one we start off with, we're going to leave the one side straight so it's easy to hang on to. And if you want all of your swags on the same side, you'll make sure that when you're holding your component, you're looking at the swags to the right hand side and that your cuts are in the back. Okay? You'll take a very fine plier, just get to the very end of the last coil there. You need to have enough room that you can pass the 20 gauge back through there, but just back bend that little bit straight up into the air, straight over the bead. So it's like a back bend over the bead. Then hold it from its side right here, just about a millimeter or so up. Hold it pretty tightly, you know, don't kill it, but hold it firm. Do an elegant curve off to the left hand side of your bead or to the opposite of the swag. And then just let the wire curve itself, take the little tip and curve back and behind the bead. Just like that, so you get a nice, elegant 90-degree from the stem, from the top stem. And you've got this elegant little curve coming down the side. And we just won't close that up until we insert the previous, the next link. So from up here, once you get that curve looking the way you want, I like to hold it right here. So the curve is where you want it, and then hold it right there. I'm right above the last coil here, and I'm right beside the stem. And I'm just holding it in place while I back bend over the stem. I'm going to cut it off, or you can make a little curl, whatever you want to do, but in my case I'm just going to cut it off. So I'll squeeze it closed, and I'll get it kind of pointing to the back, that fragment. This wire wants to move a little bit, so we can always, make it a little curvier again by tweaking the bottom here a little bit. But we're going to cut it right there and just make the cut face itself. It's a pretty tight cut, but you can do it. Just get the flat end of your cutter and come right here, right beside the wire that's underneath it, and don't cut the wire that's underneath it. Just trim it off with like 1 millimeter to spare. And then get right on that cut. Put your plier to the back of the curve here. So the plier head to the back of the curve, and then address the front of the curve and just tap it into itself. Just like that. Okay, so then you have something that looks like this, and then you can make this a little more elegant by putting your pliers right here and just doing a cute little turn and bend and get it like that. This wire is independent, the 20 gauge, so it might want to flap around on you. You just manage that. Keep this upright and keep it elegant and keep it open so that we can get the next component through it. So for instance, I've made this one, and linking these together, I've just kept a little bit of space there so that I can slip the next loop through. So that's our next part. Up here, I like to bend it towards the side of the swag. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do that every time. I had a couple of links where I bent it the other way, but this way it keeps the cut end on the same side. So with the fine plier, just make a 90-degree bend. Don't pull, don't push. Just bend the wire 90 degree to the right. You'll cut it off, leaving about 1/4 of an inch. And you'll use your very fine round nose plier right here at the tip. You can always mark the spot on the plier so that each loop is the same. And you can measure each loop, each length if you want. I just kind of eyeball it. Hold firm and just turn, turn all the way back over yourself and into a loop. Just like that. Take the flat nose pliers and tap it flat. And you can always, center it a little bit if you need to. And you have this beautiful little component. That loop has to be big enough to at least fit around the bottom of the previous link, but you could make it very big just to be decorative. So open it up scissor-wise. Make sure you're looking at the front of it, so the swag is to my right. You'll open that little link up scissor-wise. You'll make sure that you're holding your bracelet links all in the correct direction, and then you'll just attach, just like that. And then you'll close this little loop up. I like to always tap it and make sure it's closed. And just do that as many times as you need to make yourself either a chain or a beautiful bracelet. That's going to make a gorgeous bracelet. Let me back the camera off slightly. That's beautiful. So you'll make as many of these links as you need to get around your wrist and make a beautiful bracelet for yourself, or to make a beautiful chain. All right, so I'll make my next one. I'll make sure that I'm looking at the front of the bead. Let me change my camera. I know this because my cuts are in the back. I'm going to take a very fine nose flat plier. I'm going to grip right below the last coil there at the very tip of the plier. And I'm just going to bend up 90 degrees and straight back over the plier head and straight up the bead. Kind of make like a little U shape. Then I'm going to grip it from the side, hold firmly, and I'm going to make an elegant bend off to the side of the bead. You just need that little hole to be enough space to insert the next link. From here, I'm just going to make a nice elegant curve and come bring it behind and above the last coil. So just like that, bring it right along and behind this wire. You can just shape it nicely. When you get it looking the way you want, hold it right here so that it doesn't move, and bend this wire up and tightly around and back over on itself. You'll take a plier and pinch it all the way around until it's kind of bending towards the back. And then we're going to cut it right here in that little tiny little hole right there. Make sure the back side of your cutter is facing that direction. Be careful not to cut any other wire, and just trim it, leaving like 1 millimeter right there at its curve. And that way you can take your plier, get the tooth on the back and on the front, on the back of the wire and on the front of the cut. Just give a little tap. Give a little tap. Make sure your thumb is right here so that you can brace against the wire as you push against that little bit, and you just bring it back to look at itself. So just like that. Takes a little bit of practice. If you need to put a little elegance back in this, you can grip it from down here, put your finger underneath and above, and then just give a little turn, give a little elegance. I think I turned too much. Remember that the 20 gauge is independent of the swag, so it turns a little bit, and that's okay. And you have just a little opening right there, enough to get the next link through. And so if you want to too, I'm going to just do a cuter curve right there. Push down a little bit right here as you're holding it, just to the side of the bead. So you still got an opening, but the wire's kind of sloping down towards the middle of the bead. Just like that. And that gives, got too much curve on that. Okay, so just like that. And now up here, I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the front of the bead, and I am, because there's my little flip. I'm going to take my fine plier. I'm going to get about 1 millimeter off the top of the last coil and make a sharp 90-degree bend. Just like that, flat 90 degree. Just going to eyeball it, but you could measure it if you wanted to. I'm going to put the very center right here on a vertical line, and I'm going to measure or eyeball about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. It's about 1/4 of an inch, about like that. And I'll just trim off the wire. Take the very narrow point of my round nose plier. And you can mark your pliers if you want to get the same spot every time. I'm just going to eyeball about 1 millimeter away from my tips. I'm going to grip the wire very tight, hold on to the bead. I use my finger as a little landing pad, and I'm just going to roll a very tight little loop into the end. Careful not to divot the wire too much as you hold it with these pliers up here, but just make a nice tight little loop. Take some flat nose pliers, give it a nice tap. Make sure that your bead is, that this is, vertical and it's going center, and that's beautiful. And then to get it onto the next link, you can just scissor open this. Brace everything here, hold the back and the front of your component, and just scissor open. Don't push, don't pull the loop out, just push the cut back. And then take your chain links, looking at the front, and just loop through the bottom there of the previous one, and then close that link, that loop back up. Give it a little tap, make sure everything's nice and flat, and that's beautiful. I could give this one a little more curve right there. The previous one. Okay, so that's gorgeous. And this is too big of an opening here, so I'm just going to hold on to it. That's why it keeps spinning. And I'm just going to press this flat, making sure that I stay next to the bead. Close that little space up, but not the link space. So I'm just kind of skirting the side of the bead, and that looks a lot more elegant. And so I'll go and double check all my links and just make sure that they're beautiful and that they're settled down, like this one could be settled. So hold the bottom, then just use your fingernail and lower the wire so that it, kind of skirts the side of the bead right above the coil right there. And that's beautiful. I'll do the same with this one. Make sure you have a nice elegant curve, and then hold it at its side and use your fingernail and just lower that space so that the wire is touching the edge of the bead. And if you need to, you can, I did that one a little bit too much, just curve this a little bit. There's Jolene in the background, just like that. And just touch them up, don't overwork them, but just make sure that, these spaces are nice and cinch down a little bit. You could even tap it with your plier lightly without making plier marks. Just right there, right below the bead, but above that little hole, so that you don't close that space. And I did these already. So just like okay, Jolene. All right, well, I will need to tend to my beloved animal here. So I'll just tap these a little bit. Just make sure that you get a nice, beautiful curve. That's beautiful. So all of the flipped wires here are touching, or right above the coils without closing that space. And they're all looking pretty consistent. So after a little practice, it becomes real easy to do these. I hope you enjoyed that. And we'll work on making a hook and a closure for this beautiful bracelet next. Okay, so I've made 9 links for the size bracelet that I need. And basically when I take this around my wrist, the links are going to meet tip to tip. It's hard to see underneath this camera. But basically you want to make enough links so that when it comes around your wrist, it's just about here, link to link. Just like that. Or tip to tip, just like that. Okay, and it shouldn't be tight, but it shouldn't be loose either, because we're going to add another link, we're going to add the clasp, and that'll give it another 1/2 inch or so. So about like this, or however you like to wear it. All right, so to make my very last link with a loop so that I can turn this end into a hook, I'm going to take and make sure that I'm looking at the front of my component because my cuts are in the back. And I'll take my plier and do the same as if I was going to make a loop down here. So we'll make a smaller loop up here, but we'll make first a bigger loop on the one end. So I'll hold my plier there and turn 90 degrees, about 45 degrees. Turn to about 45 degrees. Take your round nose plier. I like to go about middle of the plier. It's probably about a 4mm loop. And just hold on to it. Use the plier. Come all the way around the plier head to make a little loop that you can use as an end to the bracelet. Switch to my flat nose and I'll make one very clean and tight wrap all the way around and to the back. Cut it off with just about 1mm to spare so that I can tap that end down. Starting to lose my light here, I'm sorry you guys. Just tap that end down. And if you feel that, then you can sand that, but otherwise it should be pretty clean. So that'll be the very end of the bracelet. And now I'll show you how to do this end so that we get a little loop like that. So with this one, same thing. Hold about 1mm up and bend a 90 degree. We'll take the round nose plier and grip about a couple of millimeter in. I'm going to turn a tight loop all the way around that plier head. Let me just adjust my pliers here so I get a nice little loop that's the same size as all the other little loops. But before I do anything to close it, I'm going to come down here to my bracelet link. My swags are on the right hand side. Hold the link so that the swag is to the right hand side and I'll turn it upside down, or flip it over, insert, and just squeeze through that little loop, and then your swag should turn out on the same side as all the other ones. Now we'll go to close this. Use a flat nose plier. It's a little tricky hold because the other link is in the way, but you can just hold it flat like this. Come 360 around this, whoop, around this bar right here. Not quite 360, it's more like a half to the back. Make sure all that is nice and straight. And then with this one, we're just going to mimic this shape right here. If you need to straighten it out, you can do that. And I like to kind of get it pointed down a little bit, slope down a little bit, and just make a nice elegant curve on it. I like to use my pliers to help me. Come to the front and just cross over the front till you get to about right underneath the previous coils there. And then just take and wrap. You're right next to the swag. We have thick coils from this one here, so you'll just take and wrap once all the way around. Use your plier to help you. Ooh, I'm barely there. There's no waste. And I'm just going to tap it back so that it lays nice and flat. And then you can use your fingers and just shape this a little bit. Oh, I kind of wrinkled mine up a little bit, but you get the idea. Just make it nice and beautiful, and that would be the end of your bracelet. I'm going to try to put a little elegance on this by turning this up a little bit. There we go. I wrinkled my wire. You might give yourself a little bit more, like 5 inches on the intended last link. I'll just have some sanding to do there. That looks pretty good. Now we have a big loop for your hook to go into. So on the opposite side of the bracelet, we have this guy. If you hold all of the links flat and bring them around, this loop is open this way, which means your hook has to go that way so that it hooks in nicely. Alright, so I replaced my link up top. We just made this loop. I went ahead and replaced my one up top with the little thicker one, but still it'll be all the same. So we have a couple of inches left, probably 1.25 inches or an 1.5 inches up here on the wire we started off with. I'm going to cut it back to about 3/4 inch. So I'm just going to measure from this coil to about 3/4 inch, and then I'm just going to snip it off. I'll take my round nose plier and I'll just go about halfway into this wire and just start a little bend. So I've got about 1/4 inch right here, and I'm just going to bend it all the way over. Right here at the top, I'll do a slight back bend on it. And then down here at the tip, I'll take the very tip of it and just do a little bit of an upturn, just like that. I'll go ahead and hammer it. I'll put it on its side. Hammer the curve a little bit. I'll make sure to file that end. And you know, you could actually just end both. You could put a loop at both ends and then make a lobster clasp as your ending closure as well. And there you have it. Now we can close the bracelet just like this. Probably make that even a little smaller if you want to. And you have this gorgeous linked beaded bracelet. So you to put it on just like that. And that's a beautiful bracelet. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for being here to create with me. And if you make yourself a gorgeous linked bracelet like this, please look me up on social media and show me your beautiful work. Please give me a thumbs up and leave me comments. Let me know how you're feeling about this project. And I will see you guys for the next one. Thanks a lot. Much love. We'll see you next time.